Well, then the arc that I cut is also going to be bisected. So this chord got cut into congruent pieces. This arc is also cut into congruent pieces. And I should have marked these as different because obviously the arc and the chord aren't the same length, Mrs. Cerna, duh. But this half will be congruent to this half, and this half will be congruent to this half. Bonus, when we chop it in half, it's always perpendicular. The only time you're going to get this chord and this arc being bisected is if this radius or diameter is actually perpendicular to it. If I take a radius and come that way, that's not going to bisect anything. You'll see that this piece is way bigger than this one. So it has to be perpendicular to the chord in order to bisect it. Okay? Well, guess what? It also works in reverse. So over here now, if I have a radius or diameter that happens to be perpendicular to a chord, then I know that that chord had better be bisected and its arc better be bisected. So this and this length are the same, and this one are the same, all because it was perpendicular. So you're going to see lots of things where perpendicular things lead to congruent things, and congruent things lead to more congruent things, and it all goes backward as well. Okay, so moving on to another example. I want to find x. So x is a value here included in this chord. And so you start looking at your picture for a minute and you say, what information do I have here that I can use to solve my problem? And you go, okay, well, I have that this arc and this arc are both congruent. Well, hold on. If I have congruent arcs, it must mean that I have congruent chords. That was one of the first ones that we talked about. So you go, okay, if I have congruent, let me mark all this stuff. I'm highlighting everything here. So if I have congruent arcs, then I have congruent chords. So I can set this up and say that this length equals this one. So the 18x minus 2 has to equal the 52 because the chords are congruent. Algebra, 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 and x comes out to be 27. Okay? Hold on. Shouldn't have been 27. Should have just been 3. Mrs. Cerna cannot math. X is just 3, not 27. But yeah, you use the fact that the arcs are congruent to get the chords are congruent, and because they're congruent, you can find x. Good job, me. I did so well. I hope you caught that before I said it. Hope you realized that there was something goofy there. Okay, next example. Come on. There we go. So example 2. So I've got this big old ugly fella now. I know it's blown up from something smaller. Okay, so looking at this picture now, I say that NP equals 5x minus 34. That's this piece right here. I say it's got a length. And then PN also has a length. And I want to find the length of MP here. Okay, and so you start looking at your picture and thinking about, well, what do I see here? What am I given? Well, I am given that these arcs are congruent. All right, so let's see if I have that marked here. Oh, don't see that yet. And so I'm going to see what I've got marked here. So this arc and this arc are going to be congruent. Well, remember, congruent arcs tells me that I have congruent chords. So now I have this chord and this chord are going to be congruent. But wait, if their chords are congruent, they must be the same distance from the center and perpendicular. So this perpendicular distance and this perpendicular distance have to be the same. And so then I can take these amounts that I was given and set it up. The arcs are congruent, so the chords are congruent. The chords are congruent, they've got to be equidistant from the center. And so now I can set up an equation that takes that, come on buddy, there we go. So since they're equidistant, I can put these values in and say, okay, NP is 5x minus 34, and PN is 2x minus 4. And I can math, and this time, yes, I mathed correctly, and x equals 10. But wait, that's not what I was supposed to find. I'm supposed to find NP. So I'm going to have to use this value now and plug it back in to my equation for MP. So MP equaled 5 times x minus 4, and you get that MP equals 46. So always double check that you've actually answered the question and not just found x, because sometimes you got to do a little bit more. Example 3 now. Let me just erase some of the garbage from before. And we've got a whole slew of things that we're going to figure out now. Okay? So I'm giving you that RS, so this chord, is 18. And this little half arc down here is 42. Arc TY measures 42 degrees. And then the picture is just chock full of stuff that we need to figure out. So let's see what we've got here. Well, I am told that this distance and this distance are congruent. So if this distance is congruent to this distance, I know that the chords have to be congruent. So this big one and this big one have to be congruent. But wait, if the chords are congruent, then I know that the arcs have to be congruent. And so I can start figuring out a bunch of things now. So if the chords are congruent, TU had to be 18, because I was told that this red guy was 18, so now blue guy has to also be 18. Next, to find TV, right here, this little piece, well, TV is just part of that big blue one. And see how I have a radius that's perpendicular to the chord. That means that this is bisecting that chord. And if I'm bisecting the chord, I know that those pieces are half the whole thing. So the whole thing is 18. That means half of it should only be 9. Okay, so now I've got this piece is 9. But wait, since my chords are equidistant from the center and their arcs are all the way congruent, the chords are congruent, their half chords are congruent. So if TV is 9, then this one being bisected, its half segment is also only 9. Okay? So I was perpendicular, I bisected, I got 9. On this one, I was perpendicular, so I bisect it, and I get 9 there as well. Next, I get to start looking at my arcs. So my next arc is the measure of arc YU. YU is this little guy down here. Okay, so we're looking for this one. Well, that arc is the other side of this arc. And remember, since my radius is perpendicular to the chord, it's going to bisect this arc. So this piece and this piece must be the same size. So TY is 42, therefore YU must also be 42. And so now just a bunch of colors are popping up here. Okay? And so YU had to be 42. Now I'm looking for arc RS. So RS is this big red arc here. Well, again, I have this much of the arc right here, and it's 18. Well, since my radius is perpendicular, I know that it's going to bisect that arc. And so if this half is 18, this half must also be 18. And so then the whole thing must be the sum of them both and add up to RS. Where did I get 84? Oh, yes, it's because it wasn't 18. 18 is that guy. Mrs. Cerna, get it right for your video so you don't have to re-record the video. The arc is 42 degrees, so this arc is 42 degrees. I should have put that 18 right here. And if this is 42, this part is 42, and it totals 84. Real life teaching in action. But all it comes down to is if you've got the perpendicular, everything is getting bisected. And if you're equidistant from the center, everything's all congruent. And so it all makes friends. Okay? So take that, do your best. We'll see you for the next lesson.